A very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to ICF Travel Series Break Free Session number 10 by Priyanka Borpujari. She will be presenting a session on the topic what to pack when you go out on a 1200-kilometer walk across India with Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Paul Salopek. And Priyanka herself is an award winning journalist, and she has reported on issues of human rights and everything in between from across India, El Salvador, Indonesia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Argentina. Currently, she is based in Tokyo, Japan, and between 2018 and 2019, she walked 1200 kilometers across different parts of India with two-time Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Paul Salopek on the Out of Eden walk, which traces the path of human migration. So we will listen to the story of that journey today, and Priyanka will be sharing her experience, and she will also be sharing a lot of photographs later on in the session. So over to you, Priyanka.
Hi, thanks again for having me on this forum, and thanks to all of you who are joining in, in your afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you might be. And I think we're all facing a lot of Zoom fatigue right now. So I guess, in spite of that, I'm not going to talk anything about COVID. I'm just going to be going back through some memory lane. And I hope you're just going to enjoy this, and we'll have some time for lots of conversations and for us to stay in touch. And the pandemic has been a time when people are really walking, and I think that's a fantastic tool to just keep our health, our overall health in shape. So I guess this might just nudge you all to start walking a bit, if you're not doing that already. Our forefathers walked a lot, and that's something we would keep hearing all the time. And so now what I have done and what Paul is doing seems like out of this planet. But think about it, until about 3 generations ago, at least in India, people were walking long stretches, and that was normal. Women in India today still walk long distances to fetch water or firewood, and not just in India, in many countries. So what I'm doing might seem exotic, but then it's very much rooted in the ethos of us as a culture of humanity. So yeah, so there's that we'll be taking a walk through. All right, I'm going to share my screen, and I hope my screen is visible to all. Yeah, okay. So the context, if you haven't already, please look up Paul Salopek. He's a two-time Pulitzer-winning journalist, and he has developed the Out of Eden walk that traces the path of human migration. For many years, he was the Africa correspondent for Chicago Tribune. And as you might be aware, journalists often parachute into a place. And I've been a journalist too, and I would always just go to a place only when something happens. And we miss out on all the stories in between. And I was at MIT on a fellowship in 2012 when I heard Paul speak about his upcoming walk. And I really wanted to walk across the US at that time. And I asked him if it's safe or not. And he's like, yeah, it should be. And I told him, well, when you visit India, when you reach India on your path, I'm going to join you. He's like, yeah, sure. And I kind of did not forget about it, but I also said that almost half jokingly. And years later, I'm absolutely privileged to be walking with him. It's not an easy task. It requires a bit of training. And yet at the same time, it's one of the most intimate forms of storytelling because you are walking with people. You're meeting people where they are and not, on a different plane. So to just give the basics about the project, the whole project of Out of Eden Walk, the whole path is meant to be 21,000 miles or 33,000 kilometers. Paul reached India, entered India from Pakistan, from the Wagah border, and then he exited India from Imphal, just outside of Imphal to Myanmar. And the total length of his walk in India was 17 months across 3,900 kilometers. These 17 months include lots of pauses, necessary pauses that are required for various reasons. And because storytelling and writing the stories takes quite a bit of time to do it really well. It's not just like tweeting out something. So a lot of the stuff that you see on the Out of Eden walk, Twitter and Instagram handles, we're truly going slow because the world has gone so fast. And when we slow down, we really understand the essence of what things are. So this is the original path. 60,000 years ago, humans started migrating, and this is the path of human migration. And the first, human fossils were found in Djibouti in Ethiopia. And humans migrated in all these directions, but the longest path was perhaps eastward. And that's the path that Paul is planning on walking. And he's going to be finishing at Tierra del Fuego in Argentina. This is where he started in January 2013. And most of that is a walking route wherever feasible. When he gets here, it's going to be by boat. There's also been some boat journeys here if you look through the website. And this looks like a path across the Himalayas, but then we were on the foothills, right? We just kind of walked through a parallel line, a parallel straight line east-west from across India. So to zoom in, that's where he entered from, and that's where he exited. And Paul is always walking with several walking partners. And these walking partners are people from all walks of life who know the lay of the land. So he has walked with this National Geographic explorer and brilliant photographer and Arti Kumar Rao. He's walked with Siddharth Agarwal, who's walked along India's longest rivers and talking about ecology. He's walked with journalist Bhavita. He's also walked with another journalist, Hormaz Mehta, and several others. Yeah. So this is the stretch that I have walked with him. And of course, Prem Panikkar, a legendary journalist whose writings are just phenomenal, whether he's writing about politics or cricket. So this was the long stretch. I started walking with Paul from here just outside of Jaipur, and I went up to Gwalior in MP. And then I joined him again from Purnia in Bihar to Siliguri in West Bengal. And then I went from Gosaigaon to Khanduli, midway in the Karbi Hills of Assam. So these three stretches, these three paths constitute 2,400 kilometers. Now, I started walking. I reached Jaipur in mid-June 2018. March of 2018, I was bedridden with typhoid, and I thought that's like the worst thing to have happened to a person, and it truly is. And I just had to recover myself because I knew that Paul was on his way, because we had already discussed that I'll be walking with him. I began training every day in Bombay and whichever city I was, traveling to like get some muscle memory. And I show these two photographs because this photograph shows me all happy and excited, but it's actually a photograph of how foolish I was, having this huge backpack and a yoga mat and another cloth bag and just thinking I can carry everything. And this is our beloved donkey Raju. And very soon in the trail, this is outside my house in Bombay before I would head out. And this is somewhere, maybe the fifth or sixth day of the walk, where Raju is, a cargo animal, and donkeys are very sturdy, and they're able to carry huge weight because that's how they're built, their bodies are. So I offloaded a lot of my stuff onto the bag here, and every time I'd feel a bit of guilt, and Paul would tell me that that's Raju's duty, and we would like feed him and take care of him. A lot of our stops were based on what would be comfortable for Raju, where he would find a shed, for him to rest, water and food, and where people would not bother him a lot. So that's me later on. all tanned up and, just carrying a smaller, like the same bag, but in smaller in size. And this blue thing that I had was my camel bag to sip water, because taking a bottle out from the bag, and then removing it, drinking it takes a lot of time. I was absolutely averse to the idea of buying water at all. So I just knew I had to find a way to be efficient about that. This is my hotel room in Jaipur, just before we actually started the walk. This is the stuff that I had carried in from Bombay, and here again, this is a photograph of my foolishness, or my or a dreamy part of me. Yeah. And I'm just going to run through the objects because I'm going to show another part. And the reason why I'm showing all this is because, in case you all decide to walk again, we privileged ones who are walking, right? Millions of Indians have walked last summer to get home, just because the Indian government had these draconian laws and draconian rules to ensure that, in a way, to prevent the spread of the virus, but then just left them with just no sense of way to get home, or because their landlords and their employers themselves were not going to be thinking about them. So my backpack is, and my talk is one of immense, immense privilege. I get to talk about it. Scores of millions and millions of people, millions of Indians who walk back home are not doing this talk. So many of them have lost their family ones. So I think let's keep that in mind, and even as we walk through this walk of adventure, right? So starting from here, these shoes, I continue to wear them definitely. Uh, 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 a smaller pack of toiletries, but this is connected to this a bigger set of toiletries, which alone was like 2 kilos in weight, which was absolutely stupid. This is a gamcha, or Indian towel, that I used, and it's like traveled with me everywhere. This was another big diary, I think. I'm forgetting what that was now. This was one trouser that I packed. I would wear another trouser, a wind cheater for myself, and a rain cover for my bag, two kurtas and pajamas, and three dupattas, because I'm in India, I would require that. I thought I'll be doing yoga. I mean, how I just can't believe how stupid I was to be carrying this, this yoga mat, a hat for the sun, which I lost within like 3 days of walking, and this was a waist pouch because I needed to have money and a notebook and a pen and some other essentials handy. This is my camelback for water, my camera, which was again 1 kilo in weight. I carried, half kilo of candies, sweet candies, those orange and lemony ones, because I used to have a lot of. I would get acidic, but at the same time, I just needed something sweet in my mouth because my pressure could go low. You know, um, 250 grams each of almonds and cashews and kishmish, raisins and walnuts, and this alone is like almost 2 kilos in weight. About 5 pairs of socks, about 7 or 8 pairs of underwear, my laptop, and just sandals to like change, yeah, headlamp, and a really big diary, for my everyday writing, and a journalist notebook. And I carried like several sports bras, and those were really, really difficult on me, because at some point, and I've written also that at some point during the walk, I felt that both my bra straps and my backpack straps were competing to kill me. And men, you don't have to deal with this. This is truly a really difficult issue. And then a whole big bag of sanitary napkins. This was within like one day. I realized I definitely cannot carry this. Within 1 hour, I'm like, I have to offload all of this. So all this food and all the other items were gone off to Raju's backpack. Um, this is me, wiser, leaner backpack on the second route. This is in West Bengal, like crossing like the border of Bihar and West Bengal. Like, just, when we think of borders on the map, they seem quite defined. but when you walk, you see that borders are not really borders. They just kind of flow. It's like, where we talk about, where we look at maps and we see seas and rivers, and we talk about this river is in this state and this river in this state, but the water is just flowing. And I think that's how borders are even within India. That's something Paul has definitely experienced across the world. Borders are something that are put only by the state, they're enforced, but the lay of the land, the people, and the culture, it just seamlessly flows one into the other. So that's why I say this is between Bihar and West Bengal, because one step ahead it could be just any of the places, and you see the slight changes in the texture of the land and the culture and the people. This is Siddharth Agarwal and Ace Walker across India, and this was I, walking with him, and it was just a time when the two of us were walking. And of course, my backpack is leaner, and this is what I want to talk about, how you can carry with this later on. This is me trying to cross, one of the many, many, many hand woven, efficient bridges across India. I mean, we don't consider the people who make them as engineers. We only talk about engineers when it comes to robust, big highways and big bridges. And one of my favorite saying is a father looking, a father driving on the street somewhere, and they're going over a bridge, and the father telling the child, "Remember, child, every bridge was made by the lowest bidder." Yeah, but then these are bridges of necessity made of bamboo, hand woven by people whose skills governments just say are deemed as unskilled laborers, right? They are not the ones writing theories and paper on how to build, and they make them during monsoon and dismantle them during the lean months when there's no monsoon, because they can just walk over those bridges, right? So in a way, I was feeling like I'm also bridging across cultures and bridging across different stereotypes of what India is, and about myself too. So what did my final backpack contain? And this is the backpack that I think I will pack with myself again next time I go walking. So just a regular, pair of plastic sandals. Because the second time I was walking in the month of January, so it was a bit cooler. So I had a fleece blanket, a pouch for my spectacles and sunglasses, which I hardly wore, chargers for my laptop and my phone, the same waist pouch in which I was carrying, my wallet, my pen, my notebook, hand sanitizer, and money, toilet paper, camelback again, my laptop, my notebook, reporter's notebook, just maybe one or two bras, just two or three panties, just three or four pairs of socks, because I would wear two pairs of socks every day, just two t-shirts and one that I would be wearing, one pair of trousers and another that I would be wearing, one kurta and one pajama, because every time we would arrive and stay in a village, I would take a bath or a shower or whatever is available with the water. And I felt I just wanted to change into something more comfortable, culturally comfortable, let me just put it that way. And also, it was just easier for me to just navigate around. A scarf, which was really multi-purpose, to around my neck, to cover my head on a hot day, to wipe my face, to just wipe my hands, literally multi-purpose for everything. This steel tumbler was the one, you can't see the side handle on it. It's like the regular cup, we all Indians, we have seen that. And this was again another multi-purpose thing that was always hung outside on one of the buckles of my backpack, because it was for water, it was for instant coffee, it was when I needed to go to the toilet and just needed to get some water. And it's just amazing, because the whole sense of what we think of hygiene is a very relative concept. Like, I'm sure my mother would say that, how can you drink coffee from the same mug which you use in the toilet? But really, who defines what's clean and what's not? Because finally, it's just about things staying clean, right? And I think this whole minimalist thing of when we would just be sweaty and walking, really, who decides, that you're too sweaty or too less sweaty, right? Anyhow, these were just my toiletries, just one lotion, cream or lotion. That's it that I carried. A face wash, a Himalaya face wash that I carried, which is not just for my face, it was for my hands after going to toilet, and also just for my whole body, because it's the same thing. It's a detergent for the body, right? It has the same things: toothbrush, toothpaste, a nail cutter, and contact lens. And and all of this was basically in this pouch. That's what I took it out. A menstrual cup for the days when I was menstruating, and my gumcha, obviously, because I had, to for drying myself. What's all because this photograph has been recreated later on in my apartment in Bombay, and it's not taken immediately after I came back from the walk. Obviously, this background color is just a background color for the photograph. Many other things are missing from this photographic list. It's, a hoodie that I was carrying because it was cold in the mornings. Nescafe, the necessary drug in the morning to get me out of bed and get me walking. Wallet, and that big size of dry fruits that I had, as if I'm walking through Arabia. It was down to about 100 grams because I just needed to pop 2, 3 of them in the morning. Small thing of hand sanitizer, which I hardly used, honestly. A small detergent pack, earphones, rain jacket, deodorant, headlamp, and phone. Yeah, you can pretty much survive on just these things for days on end, and you'll be fine. I was also carrying, yeah, I remember I was also carrying 2, 3 big fat books along with me. That just became redundant because I was reading stuff on the phone or on my laptop, and not always, right? Because there were days on end when there was just no network and I'll just like download stuff. But I wouldn't also have time to download and read them because I'll just be so tired at the end of the day that I would just use my phone purely as a phone just to communicate with people. So, I'm moving on to the next segment of my talk, but basically, I just wanted to share that you can look up Out of Eden Walk on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and definitely the website whose link I'll share in a moment. But I documented the things that I saw because every walking partner across all the countries that Paul has walked, and definitely across India, saw things differently. And I've documented all of that with this hashtag footsteps inward outward. And I'm going to like run through some of the photographs now to give you a sense of what we saw. And I guess you can also keep the questions coming at this point, maybe in the chat group, which I will take on later on. Yeah. Okay. So, um, oops, sorry, I shared the same screen. Sorry. What was that? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to run through backwards from down to up because it just shows all the things that I saw. This is starting from Rajasthan. I'm just running through them and I'll stop wherever, I think I have something significant to talk about. One thing that I definitely saw was garbage, a lot of garbage. And it really did not matter if it was urban area or rural India. India just loves to litter, and I don't understand why do we do that? Why do we think that it's someone else's job to keep our areas clean? And I suspect that has a lot to do with the caste system because upper caste people always had someone from the lower caste to pick up after them. And you just see that perpetrating everywhere Indians go. You see it on international flights too. And that's something I just couldn't stop noticing. This was a face off between can you see the photograph? Yeah, okay. Because I think there's an internet, issue. This is our little Raju who kind of, I guess, intimidated a horse, and Paul trying to just like, just shush it away. So a lot of people were amused to see our beloved Raju because you don't see a donkey walking for a long time. A lot of buffaloes just stopped doing their buffalo thing and just stopped to just look at him. It was just most marvelous and amusing. We stayed in temples, we stayed in mosques, we stayed in different places. We met farmers who were dealing with one of the biggest crises in India right now, the water crisis, where perhaps someone like this gentleman, when he was a young man, they would have just dug through just 100 feet down to get water. And now they're having to dig bore wells down to 700, 800 feet to, sorry, 700, 800 meters to just go down and to get water. And that's a massive crisis across our country right now, an agricultural crisis. This is a very interesting photograph because Paul had just gone off to get some food and told me to just rest for a bit until he gets back, and all the kids just were amused to see who's this white man all sweaty walking, who's this weird like this animal that's also walking and is now pausing, and then they just like surrounded me ki, didi aap kaun hai, kahan se aaye hai, what are you doing? So it was just always fun even after a tired day to sit down and chat up with the kids. These are some moments of beauty that we would stumble upon. It was a well, and we just walked past it, and we just saw this huge forest of weaver bird nests, and we just heard this beautiful bird song of the birds coming in from inside the well. And it was just one of the most fascinating things that you don't really see on any map. You just have to walk literally to go through it. Um, just going up really slow. Yes, we could not definitely. Ambedkar was very present in our minds and in the spaces we walked, to just constant reminder of the penetrating forces of caste system in India, right? And it was quite distinct when we would walk across villages where caste was alive and in not good ways. Beautiful doors outside people's homes, and really welcoming homes at that. Um, uh, this woman, she had her husband decided to host us for the night, and then, and it's very interesting. She had many kids, and as the conversation truly went, she's like, "Are you married?" I said, "No." She's like, "Good, don't marry, else you'll be stuck with husband and kids and susupoti." And I was just so thankful to her, because we have a very stereotypical idea of Indian women, but then it was just so interesting for me to see that what would have been an older rural women in patriarchal Rajasthan with an odhani had something so deeply philosophical and important to tell me about life. Uh, and that was just amazing to hear those kinds of nuggets, because we just assume that women in India, especially in rural India, have bought into the patriarchy and would perpetrate that to the others, but not so much really. Interesting to see newspapers where they're talking about agriculture. As a journalist in urban India, I would never see pages after pages which were just pages dedicated to agriculture, right? We just talk about urban issues only. Paul has previously walked with camels in Arabia, so in different places. So it was interesting to see Paul saying hello to another camel that he saw on the way. uh, this was a wonderful Babaji, a priest at a temple um, who let us stay there. And when there were other men in the temple who were around there, he was a bit careful about where Raju should stay. And when everyone had left and it was night, he allowed Raju to come and stay inside the temple, and he was quite worried for Raju's safety. I think these nuggets of what people truly are in the absence of society and others was really deeply touching for all of us. Again, another woman who we would just not think about, but she just said that, "Just stay with me." She just held me. And she just had like a zillion questions. She would have been a brilliant journalist, I guess. And to me, it was a constant. I'd been reporting on from a gendered lens for many, many years, but it was just amazing when I would walk around to see people differently. Stone quarrying, one of the most heartbreaking things to see, to hear. It just jars every sense of being. Sarmathura, a crazy tiny town which had one of the biggest Rath Yatras for that week. Both Paul and I had fallen ill in this town, and Raju too, and in these really tiny, dingy rooms. But It was just part of the process. And this was the border, this was us crossing the Chambal River, yeah. And obviously every time I'm thinking of Chambal River, I'm thinking of Gabbar Singh. But it was just fascinating to see that the moment we crossed the Chambal River from Rajasthan to Madhya Pradesh, the landscape changed. Like you could just see poverty on in your face, you know. And that was quite something that we did not we could not miss. Again, one of my favorite things to photograph. People talk, you know, like just trash everywhere around. Where was Swachh Bharat? We survived on dhaba food and dhaba rest stops, um, and just buffaloes having a great time, you know, in water. And there were so many times when Paul and I were like, yeah, we wish we could go and spend some time in the water, maybe not with them. And speaking of animals, there were many times I felt I wish I was a cow, because the Indian streets are definitely safer for a cow than for a woman, you know. And it's almost a joke, but that's also the reality. So when I just saw this moment while walking on a highway, and highways, by the way, are the most boring places to walk, because highways are just boring. They're same, they're deadly, because vehicles are zooming past, and the car brain doesn't allow people to really stop and pause and consider the next person. This was just a fascinating moment, right smack down in the middle of this 4-lane highway, where these was this family, you know, all chilled out, and we were like walking and sweating, and it was definitely a safe express for the cows, if not for us. Um, and we think about rural areas not being quite concerned about women's health, but it was just fantastic to see a whole big wall with graffiti talking about how different ways that women should care for themselves while menstruating. I think that was just absolutely fascinating. um, and this was me at the end, my feet at the end of the first leg of the walk, all soiled up and everything. And I had blisters, you know, under my feet for a long time. And I wanted to peel them apart, but then Paul rightly said that those are my medals, right? So I can't be peeling them. They'll just wear off on their own whenever they have to. All right. I know we're going a bit late on time, but I think I'm just going to continue with the photographs for a bit, and then I'll check your questions and comments later. Yeah. This was the last night in my first leg, in the first phase of the walk, where we slept at a Hindu temple, and somebody just brought some rotis for us to eat that night, and it was wrapped in a paper. Which in the morning I opened to see we had. They would always bring us so much food everywhere we went, that we obviously had roti from the previous night also as breakfast. But this was actually a paper which was someone's wedding invitation card, but then it had the photographs, the images of Ambedkar and Buddha. And I'm like, caste is so alive in India. For anyone who says otherwise, they're definitely living in a bubble, right? It's as good as saying that race does not matter, but no, caste is so alive in India. And if you don't think caste is alive, you're definitely upper caste. So that's a thing to remember. Okay, so from here onwards is, and all of these photographs until here, I had put them sporadically on Twitter. And from this photograph onwards, where I started the Twitter thread anew, and therefore the second phase of the walk, you'll find it as a single thread on Twitter. And it was definitely, even before we had completed like 5 kilometers, I saw a dhaba, and I'm like, we have to stop for lassi, because without lassi, you know, and without a pause at a dhaba, a walk is definitely not complete. Dhaba is like a truck rest stop, and it's just a brilliant space to stop. Um, yeah, broken bridges. Interesting. Another dhaba where we stayed for the night. It was absolutely like a very discotheque kind of a place, with all the colors. And it was just interesting that the place was called Gulab Bagh. I'm like, it's a very gulabi kind of dhaba in Gulab Bagh. Um, and as we're thinking about Gandhi today, it was interesting to see some of the words we would see in these small schools that are just built on simple principles without any kind of external motivators. Jai Dev Guru, Rehem Karo, Rahman Milega, Daya karo bhagwan milega. And that sense of multicultural religious synchronity, which is basically talking about compassion and helping one another to find whichever God you're seeking, be it Rahman or Ram, uh, crossing rivers. And we arrived at this place literally as this was the light. We only had the big moon guiding us and just our like mobile phone lights. And it was a mosque and they were praying. And we said we needed a place because we can't walk through the night again, because we would stop the walk an hour before sundown because we just knew it that we needed to find a safe space before that. And they didn't see us, we didn't see them. I mean, how much can you see with the light of your mobile phone? And they're like, this is a mosque, you're welcome and to stay here. And it was just amazing how in the darkness we were fed, we had blankets, and we stayed safely without seeing a single person's face. It's only in the morning that we saw their faces. And if that's what happens, I guess, when you arrive at a religious space or even a non-religious space where doors just open up. Men, obviously, how can I, as a woman in India, how can I not talk about men who were just always all around Paul, a white guy, and me, this brown woman walking with him. And it was just amazing how they would just be around us all the time, not giving us even a moment to just talk and discuss, should we take a left or right? And I have to admit, sometimes my patience wore out, but I guess uh, that's a challenge of having a uterus in India, I guess, being mansplained or just being curious. This is Aziz, a lovely person. He's from Uzbekistan. You will see, you'll come across this name because Aziz was Paul's wonderful walking partner in Uzbekistan. And so and then he came and he visited, was Paul's guest for a few days on the walk. Common words in his language and in Hindi. And it was just amazing. Finding some interesting snack foods shaped like animals, barber shop, and this was such an interesting thing where we stopped at a dhaba for some snacks, and it was like a midday snack was samosa. The samosa serving plate was a newspaper, and the newspaper's news was about dengue, and the snacking company were houseflies. So it's just like that the flow of life and conversations. Adivasi Tola, anyone talking about caste not alive or discrimination not alive? This is it. It's very much alive when villages, hamlets are demarcated as Adivasi areas, indigenous or untouchable areas in the outskirts of the main villages. Yeah. Um, uh, yeah, and more dhabas, more beautiful roofs. Um this was when I felt, I think I was entering into land that was that I would recognize, because I would see sattu, and because sattu is well known in East India and it's like a power food. So yeah, just to see its wrapper itself was interesting to see. Ice cream is something we all love. Paul can always stop for ice cream, so I had to take a photograph of that. And this was when we were just almost exiting Bihar, and I started to seeing Kalima, and I realized, okay, we're definitely entering Bengal. It's because, again, as I said, borders are just, very they're like liminal spaces, honestly. Jhalmuri over here, the land of amazing fish and everything. And then we walked through Naxalbari, which was very interesting to see where our ideologies of justice and where things are now. A good meal. And then I stopped the walk. I went off to Assam to meet my family. And this was the Brahmaputra in Dhubri, which is one of the biggest port towns in Assam. And everyone talks about, Dhubri being the place where supposed Bangladeshis are and where they're coming in from. But Dhubri is one of the most multicultural towns without which rest of Assam would not be getting any of its commerce or businesses. So it's so interesting that every time when it comes to providing our basics, we tend to think about them as not being essential, right? A brick kiln, one of the most devastating spaces that I've ever seen. Bricks that for which you may create your own home, but bricks which, uh, to make a home with the people who are working there, toiling, they cannot afford to buy any of these homes. It's one of the scariest places to watch, to bear witness to labor as we see it even today, bonded labor to some extent. Okay, more of Assam and gods who have gone blonde, interestingly, and abandoned. Um, this was a very interesting restaurant that I saw where I just went there for a meal where we stopped, and there were these kind of booths, with curtains on, and I was just minding my own thing. And then there was like a boy and girl who were like a college going boy and girl there, and then they emerged and they left. And then the person who ran the cafe, she was a wise old woman who said that, look, kids are going to be kids, teenage years are going to be the teenage years. They need the privacy. So all I'm going to do, if I need business, I'm not going to shoo them away from being who they are. And I'm just going to put in curtains. And I thought that kind of wisdom we don't often see in urban India. uh, Protima Borwa Pandey, a very well-known musician in Assam, and I had to stop and take her photograph, not because she's a famous woman, but because across a country of statues, it was so few women statues that we would come across. It's just unbelievable. Uh, Again, this is human engineering of magnificent proportions. This is made, this is woven, and again built and broken down again. Not even broken down, would be like taken apart in winter again so that people can walk through, and this is rebuilt again and again. You can just see the long extent. It took me like 5 minutes to walk through this whole thing, and we don't talk about the people who make them as engineers. This was in the chars of Assam. The chars are like moving islands where so-called Bangladeshi people live, the people who are growing the rice for the rest of Assam. And it was at the time when we were talking about NRC, and issues of citizenship were high on everyone's mind. And here was a public service campaign on cleanliness, which I find was so interesting. Every time you have to talk about cleanliness, you have to relate it to a woman's honor, because this is literally saying that you need to build a toilet in your own house, because if you don't, your woman's going to go out of the house, and that's going to be bad for her honor because if something happens to her. So we don't train. It was just a constant theme of seeing boys not being trained to be good men, but then women have to take care of their chastity. And crossing the mighty Brahmaputra. This is the Brahmaputra part of it, which is completely, dried up in some parts during winter. Yeah, I can go on. This is omelette, soul food, and power food for long days. Um, this was just some very interesting boys having a mudslide. We just had to stop. It was just amazing fun. They were just sliding down to that pool and taking plastic bags and filling it up with like the mud and water, climbing up back here, and then just throwing that mud and water and just going down in one slide down. It was just one of the most fascinating things that I'd seen, and even everyone else was bearing witness to. Um, and then there was this little calf, poor thing. It was injured, and oops, the page is injured with its arm, and this it tied with a BJP flag. I'm like, that just explains India at this moment right now. A cow being protected by a BJP flag, priorities. That's more of Assam, more of thrash. And this photograph, which I think a lot of people have seen, of grains being dried on the streets, just makes us question, what does hygiene mean, right? But then again, who defines what is hygienic, especially in 2020, where all we've done is just wash our hands. um, May 25th, 2019, election day, one of the darkest days again for India, with just having the BJP come to majority power in spite of everything that they had done and not done. Yeah, another dhaba rest stop for the night. We stayed in so many dhabas. A little I mean, I think the captions make it worth it. I know we don't have time right now, but this was just going up to Northeast, and these are in the Karbi Hills. This was literally my last day of walking, where we're walking through a forest where we knew that a wild elephant is walking. We crossed a river, and then we were attacked by leeches all through the day. And this is how a leech attack looks like. And it was like, I've had enough of them. All right. So, and then I never thought I'm going to quite leave the walk yet, but then it was time for me to leave. And that was literally the last photograph that I had taken, and a friend had taken rather, of the final walk of this whole journey. I'm going to end my talk here because I need to have a sip of water, but also because I know we're running out of time. And I'm sure all of you might have a lot of questions, but more than in comments. Yeah. So thanks for listening. Yeah. I'm going to just quickly run through the comment box, but I'm happy. I don't know the moderators. What do you think about going through the questions and points and everything?
Thanks, Priyanka. No questions as of now, but I think I will ask Jyotirmoy to share his feedback and comment about the session, and after that, maybe people will start
I'm
asking their
seeing a
queries.
lot of I'm seeing a lot of messages that have been sent. Yeah, so there's a question. Did I feel safe? I largely felt safe. As I said in the beginning, the trucks and vehicles were mostly the biggest, the most dangerous things. I often do wonder how would it be if I had to walk alone, but doing this walk has given me all the confidence that, yeah, I definitely can do it on. Yeah. Um, Yes, and then Fabian says, how much was your route planned, or how did you spontaneously choose paths as you went along? That's a fantastic question, Fabian. If you saw in the beginning, we had this map where Paul is basically walking eastward, right? He's walking eastward. So we knew that we had to be walking west to east generally. So at every pause, so we would walk for about 4 or 5 days, and then have a pause of about 3 or 4 days. And during those 3 or 4 days, when we were just eating good regular food, I mean, for me, it was just eating French fries most of the time, and watching TV in whatever hotel room it was, we would track the next 100 kilometers to see the next 100 kilometers where could be our possible pit stops. And then we would track about 25 to 30 kilometers and then through Google Maps and the satellite imaging, we would see, okay, this doesn't look green enough. It looks like it is inhabited. So maybe this is a village of people staying there. Because in rural India, the maps are not quite developed. And in a way, thank God for that. But that's how we would determine our route. And obviously, there were times when Google Maps were not accurate simply because the satellite imagery is very different from the actual path. And most of the Google Maps is constantly showing us highways, and younger people were telling us to take highways, and people just couldn't believe, what, you're walking, have you gone crazy? Like, really, are you crazy? Okay, you're not crazy, but highway, why aren't you going the highway? And we're like, because highway is the longer route and it's the most boring route. We want to cut through the hypotenuse, and that's where the stories are. This was a storytelling project. And also, I just want the hypotenuse every time in the Pythagoras theorem, right? So that was the route making, and also where we were staying for the night and planning our route. Yeah.
Yeah, Priyanka, there is another question
So
about.
yeah, sorry, Jyotirmoyji, you wanted to. Yeah.
So there is one question by Moto, actually. Moto Z2. What do you think is Paul's perception of the migration?
Hi, Moto
Paul's
Z.
perception of the migration in the
Hi.
south of India or Sri Lanka?
Uh, Although the major human paths of migration have been covered, what do you think is Paul of the migration in the south of India? Yes, we could not see because 17 months was gone and just covering, the very small sliver of North India. If Paul had to walk South India and Central India, it would have taken him 3 years. And I think we all can walk across India. And I think all of us, I think a lot of my own perceptions about places which I had reported about were broken down, right? I have reported extensively from Madhya Pradesh, from Rajasthan, and definitely from Assam. But so many of the stereotypes, almost every other day on the road, was broken down. Just when I thought that this was true, there were some stereotypes that stayed true, yes, but then mostly it was just an aha moment all the time. So that's what I'm trying to say is I can't really answer your question, but I think, and I'm glad I can't answer that because without having lived through it and walked through it, I wouldn't have been able to, we wouldn't really know what it really is. There's another question I quickly see. What was the average distance covered per day? Good question. Right in the beginning, I was able to do only about 8 to 10 kilometers, even though I was training my body for like 20 kilometers a day. Walking as a way of training is very different than actually walking and thinking about storytelling and navigating, cars and bikes and everything, and trucks definitely, and huge SUVs. But then I improved to, by then I had muscle memory. So I think the average was 25. The highest for me personally was a day of 38 kilometers, and the next day I could still walk. So I was pretty proud of myself. Obviously, someone like Siddharth is a fast walker and can also has much more stamina, and he walks longer. So I think everyone has a different pace with walking. And Paul was just amazing in assuring me that I need not compete myself with anyone else about my speed and my distance.
How are you?
Okay.
Yeah, how are you funding yourself during this period? That's from Jyotirmay.
So this is a project. So Paul has a huge crowdfunding campaign to sustain out of his work, and so with that we were taking care of our food and everything. And honestly, once you're on the street and once you're just looking for a place to stay just for the night, it wasn't really very expensive, because there was really nothing lavish to spend on. But then there's a crowdfunding campaign, and they just concluded one which went on really well to like fund for his next trip towards China, because that's a vast country and there's a lot of it there too. I see a question from someone called Neeraj. So many perspectives, so many realities. Could you kindly talk about the preparation, psychological, that you had to undertake? I think my only preparation was being excited because I knew I wanted to do this. I think my biggest challenge psychologically was about my body, to know if my body will be able to withstand it or not. Because few months before that, I had typhoid and I was bedridden. But more than that, I'd never been a very sportsy kind of a person. I was in school, but then you know how it's in India. We really don't focus on really being active and being sporty. It's all about like study well and stay at home, or that. So I was just concerned about my body, and it was really difficult for me in the beginning because I was constantly comparing myself to others, and I realized I'm not doing a good job of for the walk and for myself by thinking how many kilometers Paul walked with another walking partner. I just need to be focused on being a good storyteller with him and just keep walking every hour, averaging 5 kilometers an hour. Yeah. I know we're running out of time. I see we have 3 minutes and a quick question from Tamara about experience in the chars of Assam. Yeah, the chars of Assam are very interesting because we don't realize that these are the lands that have been, they were sometimes they were very close to the river Brahmaputra, and suddenly the river would just take over, like because of incessant flooding. And so what used to be someone's house is now just the river, and what used to be someone's and what was the river. So the rivers are constantly shifting place, and that's That's because of the climate crisis, but also other human factors, definitely like more present ones. And people have lost huge acres of land, of farmland, and their homes. A lot of people have lost their documents in recurring floods. And the challenge of that is when you lose a document, how do you prove that you're an Indian? And it's interesting because these are the people who are growing the rice for the rest of Assam, but the rest of Assam views them as outsiders and they don't have the documents to prove their citizenship. So it was absolutely heartbreaking, but it was also an eye opening for me because the chars are something that people don't talk about much and hadn't been walked. It was quite a dry space to walk, really. I just was just thinking of good things while I was walking on those dry, painful days. Yeah. All right. I think we are running out of time. I'm just going to quickly put on the chat box the links to Out of Eden Walk. And a very interesting thing has, oops, can you still hear me? Yeah. And a very interesting thing has dropped in today with, where was that? Um, please check. There is a new map that has been published by Out of Eden Walk, and it's called the King's Map. And it's as interesting as it sounds about all the interesting things that you would not expect on a walk, including there's also a separate police stops map because Paul was stopped by the police so many times. We were stopped by the police so many times because people just cannot comprehend the idea of two or three people just walking across a country, you know. And in India, it's like, "Kahan ja rahe ho?" You're saying, "Kahan?" "Kaise jayenge?" "Pedal." "Pedal?" "Pedal." "Pedal." "Sachmuch pedal." "Pedal." And it's just amazing. People's, the faces would just have different colors, because they were just so surprised. So if you look through the link that I've just sent, Out of Eden Walk, if you go through the latest stories, you'll see an interesting map of all the interesting stops, of all the interesting and quirky and crazy unexpected things that we saw and we experienced on the walk in India, but this is right from Ethiopia. It just covers the whole thing. And Paul is a brilliant writer that you might want to read up on these dark, cold days and nights.
Yeah, thanks, Priyanka, for a great session. Before we end, can we have one last question? After this amazing journey across mammoth lands of different countries, have Paul and your kind self seen anything common despite the differences in regions?
And my kind self, yeah, I had to like try and be kind on many days. I didn't want to be kind. But I think this is an answer that I'm stealing from what Paul has written about. And I'm stealing it, not just stealing it, but it's something that I've also seen is that humans are humans. Uh, People want to feed their children and want to see their children doing well. Children want their parents to stay safe and healthy, and everyone wants to have a comfortable and prosperous life. However, you define prosperity, it's relative. Um, People are yearning for their loved ones far away, and people are worried about their future, but they're absolutely generous everywhere they go. And I think and they're generous even when they might have political leanings that would just make our political selves, have a shiver. And I think that was like the biggest challenge for me to come to terms with, um, while noticing that people whose political ideologies I may not agree or align with were absolutely generous. And sometimes even the poorest person in the village joker or clown that everyone makes fun of is the kindest person. So I think, if when I look back at my walk, and I'm so grateful I get to do this talk today because it just makes me go back in time to realize the goodness that's there in humans. And only if we can really tap into that and see beyond the black and white of our stories and narratives of each other, that we have. um yeah, I think that's what I would have to say. But thank you so much, everyone. And I hope you all can walk around. And if you're taking your walks in your own neighborhoods, maybe leave the phone behind, maybe leave the earphones behind, and just do like a slow walk where you're truly walking with your eyes and your nose and your ears and all your senses open to really see, um, and to really see things as they are and clearly, and notice this shopkeeper was there and now he's not there, this tree was there, and just see how your places are evolving on an everyday basis and support those local communities. We're extremely privileged to be at home indoors and have people take care of us, but we owe it to our privilege to also be slow walkers and notice things as they are. So thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks Priyanka for a great session, and thanks to all the participants for being there. And we would like them to be part of our travel series that's going on. Our next session will be by Shubhra Mittal, who has already spent 4 years traveling across India, hitchhiking, doing volunteering. So maybe that will that session will answer Jyotirmay's question about funding and other things, because the session is titled "How to Travel Without Money," or how it is to be on the road, like with your when your pocket is empty, you can still barter your skills. So that is one of the way that she does it, and I hope Priyanka will also join us. And our next session on Saturday is not going to be on travel. It's going to be related to the field of editing, on editing front matter and notes for books. That will be by Ujjwala Vaidya. And tomorrow we will have a session at 11 a.m. It's about commissioning of trade and textbooks. That's by Anjana Sapru. So please join us at 11 a.m. tomorrow and next week at 4 p.m. Thanks everyone. Have a nice evening. And because Priyanka she is in Japan, it must be maybe around 8:30 there. So have a good night and have a nice weekend.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And let's find a way to stay in touch and hold each other through these interesting times we're living in, and enjoy walking wherever you are. Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Bye everyone.
Bye.